There are moments in life when we feel like everything is delayed. Our prayers seem unanswered, our dreams appear distant, and our efforts look wasted. We ask, God, when? When will it happen for me? But my friend, let me tell you something today. God's timing is never late, never early, but always perfect. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what you do not know. While you're waiting, He is working behind the scenes, arranging every detail for your good. The problem is not that God is silent. The problem is that we are too restless to be still and trust Him. When something you are praying for doesn't happen in your expected time, it's easy to assume that God has said no, or that He has forgotten you. But the truth is, a delay is not a denial. It is often a divine pause designed for your protection and preparation. God's sense of timing is not bound by our human clocks. He operates from eternity, seeing the entire picture when we can only see one frame at a time. What feels like a setback to you might actually be God's way of aligning the right people, the right season, and the right maturity in you for what He has planned. So often, we are like children who want the reward before we have learned the responsibility. Imagine a child asking his father for a car at the age of 10. The father, though loving, will say no, not because he wants to withhold a blessing, but because he knows that giving such a gift too early could cause harm. That same principle applies to our walk with God. Sometimes what we ask for is not wrong, it's just not right yet. God will never allow something to enter your life that your character is not ready to sustain. In those seasons of delay, God is shaping you. You might not see it, but your waiting is producing strength. It's developing patience, humility, and faith. The waiting season is not wasted time. It's training time. Every moment of silence, every unanswered prayer, every door that stays closed is building something eternal within you. When the time finally comes, you'll realize that the version of you who prayed for that blessing is not the same person who eventually received it. The waiting changed you, and that's exactly what God intended. Think about the story of Joseph. He had a dream that he would one day rise to a position of great influence. Yet, immediately after the dream, his life took a downward turn. He was sold by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If Joseph had looked at his circumstances, he could have easily believed that God had denied his destiny. But in reality, every delay was moving him closer to it. Each painful step, the betrayal, the prison, the waiting, was preparing him for the palace. When the right moment came, in a single day, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister. What looked like years of delay turned out to be divine direction. The same is true in your life. You may feel like you've been forgotten, like your dream is buried too deep to ever rise again. But remember, the seed must spend time in the dark before it breaks through the soil. Just because you can't see growth doesn't mean nothing is happening. God is working beneath the surface, arranging circumstances and preparing hearts in ways you cannot imagine. If He gave you everything you asked for right away, you would miss the beauty of His process. His delays are a sign that He is investing time in crafting something that will last. So, when you find yourself in the middle of waiting, don't grow bitter or impatient. Instead, choose to trust. God's delay is His way of saying, I'm not finished yet. It's an assurance that something better, wiser, and perfectly timed is on its way. One day, you will look back and realize that if things had happened when you wanted them to, you wouldn't have been ready. But because you waited, because you trusted, and because you stayed faithful, you received something far greater than what you expected. A delay from God is not His rejection, it's His redirection. And in that redirection lies the perfect unfolding of His plan. So hold on, keep believing, and remind yourself daily, God's delays are not God's denials. Being still before God is one of the hardest, yet most powerful lessons of faith. When life seems uncertain, when prayers feel unanswered, and when the noise of fear grows louder, our natural instinct is to take control, to fix things, to rush the process, to make something happen. But stillness is not the absence of action, it is the presence of trust. It means resting your heart in God's plan, even when you don't see movement. It's the quiet confidence that says, God is working, even if I cannot see how. True stillness is not passive, it's active faith. Faith that stands firm when everything else is shaking. Often, we confuse activity with progress. We think that if we are doing more, praying louder, or pushing harder, things will move faster. But God's ways are not our ways. Sometimes He calls us to stop striving so that He can start working. When we insist on handling everything ourselves, we often get in His way. The more we try to control life, the more anxious and frustrated we become. Stillness is God's invitation to rest from that struggle. It's His way of saying, let me be God. I don't need your panic. I need your patience. Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing at all. It means having peace while you wait. It means worshiping instead of worrying. It means praying with faith, not fear. The heart that is still before God says, Lord, even if I don't see it, I trust you completely. When we reach that place of surrender, we open the door for God to move in ways we could never imagine. The miracle happens not because we fought harder, but because we trusted deeper. One of the most beautiful examples of this truth comes from the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. After being set free from Egypt, they found themselves trapped. The Red Sea before them, Pharaoh's army behind them. Panic filled the air, and fear consumed their hearts. They cried out, wondering why God had led them there. But Moses said something remarkable. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. That moment was a test of trust. They couldn't part the sea. They couldn't defeat Pharaoh's army. All they could do was be still and believe. And when they did, God moved. The sea split. The impossible became possible, and they walked through on dry ground. Their stillness allowed God's power to be revealed. In our lives, we face similar Red Sea moments, situations that seem impossible, paths that seem blocked, and fears that seem overwhelming. In those moments, God whispers the same words, be still. When you choose peace over panic, you declare that your faith is greater than your fear. It's easy to trust God when everything is going your way, but real faith is proven when you choose to trust Him in silence, in confusion, and in delay. There's a deep strength that comes from stillness. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing that the one who created time cannot be late. It's believing that God's promises are still true, even when your emotions say otherwise. When you stop fighting against the waiting, you start flowing with God's timing. And when the time is right, He will make all things beautiful. Not by your effort, but by His power. So if you're in a season where nothing seems to be happening, don't rush out of it. God is not ignoring you. He is preparing you. Every quiet moment is molding your faith, building your character, and strengthening your spirit. The peace that comes from trusting in His timing is far greater than the stress of trying to control it yourself. Remember, the calmest heart often witnesses the greatest miracles. So today, release your need to fix everything and simply say, Lord, I trust you. I will be still and let you work. God often begins His greatest work in places we cannot see. Before a dream becomes reality, before a promise becomes visible, there is always an invisible process taking place. We live in a world that celebrates results. We admire success, promotion, and recognition. But we rarely see the hidden preparation that made those things possible. God, however, works in the unseen long before anything appears in the open. What He builds in private becomes the foundation for what will later be revealed in public. Just because you can't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. The silence and stillness are often signs that God is building something deep and lasting. Think about the seed planted in the ground. It is buried in darkness, surrounded by soil, unseen and unnoticed. For a long time, there's no evidence of life on the surface. Yet beneath the ground, something powerful is taking place. The roots are spreading, the seed is transforming, and life is forming. If someone judged the seed too early, they might say, nothing is happening. But the truth is, the most important growth happens in the dark. In the same way, God is working in the hidden places of your life, strengthening your roots before showing your fruit. He works on your heart before displaying your blessing. Many people give up because they cannot see progress. They pray, they hope, they believe, and when nothing changes outwardly, they assume God has forgotten them. But God is not ignoring you. He is investing in you. The invisible work He is doing is meant to prepare you for the weight of what is coming. If the roots are weak, the tree will fall when the wind blows. But if the roots are strong, no storm can shake it. That is why God allows long seasons of waiting and silence. He is developing the strength you will need when the visible blessing arrives. A powerful example of this truth can be seen in the life of Moses. Before he led the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness as a shepherd. To others, it may have looked like failure. The once prince of Egypt now wandering in the desert. But that hidden season was God's training ground. While no one was watching, God was shaping Moses' character, humbling his heart, and teaching him patience. When the time came for him to stand before Pharaoh, he was no longer the impulsive man he once was. He was a man refined by God's invisible work. The burning bush was a public moment of divine calling, but it was built upon 40 years of silent preparation. That is how God works with us too. You may not understand why doors remain closed or why progress seems slow. You might be wondering why others are moving forward while you are stuck in place. But God's timeline is not measured by speed, it is measured by strength. He will not reveal something publicly that has not first been strengthened privately. You may feel hidden, but you are hidden for a purpose, not from it. The longer God keeps you unseen, the deeper He is establishing your roots. When the visible finally comes, the promotion, the healing, the opportunity, the answered prayer, it will be steady and lasting because the invisible work has been completed. What grows quickly often dies quickly, but what grows in God's timing stands forever. So don't despise your hidden season. Don't lose heart when you can't see results. The same God who formed the universe out of nothing is forming something beautiful in your silence. Every quiet moment is sacred, every unseen process divine. When He is done, what He began in secret will shine in the open for His glory. Remember this, before God reveals His promise, He always prepares the person, and that preparation always begins in the invisible. Faith and feelings often move in opposite directions. Feelings are temporary, fragile, and unpredictable. They rise and fall with circumstances, while faith stands firm, even when everything else collapses. Faith is not a feeling, it's a decision, a deep, quiet conviction that God is who He says He is, and will do what He has promised, no matter how things look. There will be days when your emotions scream that God has forgotten you, that nothing is working, that your prayers are wasted. But faith whispers, He's still in control. The true test of faith is not in moments of joy and clarity, but in the long nights of silence, when nothing seems to change. Our emotions are like waves. One moment high, the next crashing down. If we live by feelings, we'll be tossed around by every storm. One day we'll feel strong, and the next we'll feel defeated. But faith is the anchor that keeps the soul steady. Faith says, even if I don't feel God's presence, I trust His promise. Feelings depend on what you see. Faith depends on what you believe. It doesn't deny reality. It simply declares that God's truth is greater than what your eyes perceive. Many people begin their spiritual journey full of passion, but as time passes and challenges come, they lose their fire because they rely on emotions instead of faith. When you build your trust on feelings, your foundation will crumble. But when you build on faith, on the Word of God, on His faithfulness, on His character, you'll stand unshaken, even in the fiercest storm. Feelings change, but God never does. That's why His promises are our firm ground when emotions betray us. Consider the story of Peter walking on water. When Jesus called him out of the boat, Peter stepped forward in faith. For a few moments, he did the impossible. He walked on the waves. But as soon as he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the storm, fear overtook him and he began to sink. What changed? The storm was already there before he stepped out. The only thing that shifted was Peter's focus. From faith to feelings, from trust to fear. When his feelings took control, his faith faltered. Yet, the moment he cried out, "Lord, save me," Jesus reached out His hand and lifted him. The lesson is powerful as long as faith leads. You'll walk above your circumstances, but when feelings take over, you'll sink beneath them. This story mirrors our daily lives. We all have moments when the winds of doubt blow hard, when prayers seem unanswered, when people disappoint us, when life doesn't go as planned. In those moments, our emotions say, give up. But faith says, hold on. God's not done yet. The enemy always attacks your emotions first because he knows that if he can shake how you feel, he can weaken what you believe. That's why we must train our hearts to follow faith, not feelings. Faith doesn't mean you never feel fear or sadness. It means you refuse to let those feelings decide your actions. You may feel weak, but faith declares strength. You may feel lost, but faith believes there's a path. You may feel broken, but faith knows there's healing. When you let faith outlast your feelings, you rise above the temporary to touch the eternal. There will be times when your emotions tell you to quit, but your faith must remind you why you started. The same God who was faithful in your past is still faithful now. He is not moved by your emotions, He is moved by your belief. When your feelings fade, cling to His promises. Keep walking, keep trusting, and keep believing. Because faith that endures through every feeling is the kind of faith that moves mountains. When God's appointed time arrives, everything begins to align in ways that human strength, effort, or planning could never accomplish. His timing carries a divine authority that no obstacle, person, or situation can resist. You may spend years waiting, wondering, praying, and preparing. And then suddenly, in one moment, everything changes. What once felt delayed suddenly moves forward with supernatural speed. That is the beauty of God's timing. When it comes, it needs no explanation, no pushing, and no striving. The doors that were tightly shut open effortlessly. And what once seemed impossible becomes reality. God's timing is perfect because He sees beyond what we can. We are limited to the present moment, but He views the beginning and the end all at once. Sometimes He withholds things we desire, not because He's punishing us, but because He's protecting us or preparing something far better. What we call waiting is often God's way of orchestrating details, connecting paths, and shaping hearts, so that when His time comes, every piece fits flawlessly into place. We often try to make things happen prematurely, forcing opportunities, rushing relationships, or pushing open doors. But anything born outside of God's timing carries frustration and short-lived results. When you allow Him to move at His pace, what He gives will last and bring peace. Think of the story of Sarah and Abraham. God promised them a son, yet the years went by and nothing happened. Out of impatience, Sarah took matters into her own hands and urged Abraham to have a child through her servant, Hagar. The result was pain, division, and consequences that lasted generations. But when God's appointed time finally came, despite Sarah being 90 years old, His promise was fulfilled through Isaac, the child of covenant and divine timing. That miracle was not dependent on human strength, but on God's faithfulness. The lesson is clear: when it's not God's time, you cannot force it, but when it is God's time, you cannot stop it. We all face moments when it feels like God is silent or late. You might be praying for a breakthrough in your career, healing in your body, or restoration in your family, and nothing seems to move. But remember, delay does not mean denial. God is not ignoring your prayer. He is perfecting your path. When the season is right, He can change everything in an instant. One conversation, One opportunity, one unexpected encounter can shift the entire direction of your life. That's how God works, not slowly, not randomly, but suddenly and perfectly. The beautiful thing about divine timing is that it requires no struggle. When something is meant for you, it will find you, even if it has to cross oceans to do so. You won't have to manipulate, beg, or force it. God's favor will go ahead of you and prepare the way. The same hand that opens the door will give you the strength to walk through it. It's not about being the fastest or the most talented. It's about being aligned with God's schedule. When His time arrives, everything will make sense. The delays, the disappointments, even the detours. What you thought was a rejection was actually redirection towards something greater. The relationships that ended, the jobs that didn't work out, the prayers that seemed unanswered, all were part of God's preparation for His perfect moment. So, if you are in a waiting season, don't lose heart. Keep your faith steady and your spirit expectant. Every second of waiting is a seed planted in trust. And when the harvest time comes, no power in heaven or on earth can stop it from blooming. God doesn't rush because He's never late. When He says, no, everything shifts. And you'll realize that every tear, every delay, and every prayer was leading to that divine yes. When it's God's time, the impossible becomes possible. The closed doors swing wide open, and what you've been waiting for finally arrives. Not by your strength, but by His perfect hand. My friend, if you are in a season of silence, don't be discouraged. Silence is not absence. God is closer than you think. The same God who created the universe with perfect timing has already scheduled your breakthrough. You don't have to chase it. It's already written in His plan. All He asks is this: